Welcome to the Fieldhouse Podcast. I am your host, Sam Vecenie. I'm here with good friend and contributor to The Athletic, Aaron Torres. Aaron, we've got a nice little slate of games scheduled up for Thursday night. We've got a nice slate of news and notes to talk about here. The biggest news right now is Michael Porter has been cleared for all basketball activities. Duke is back, maybe? Louisville has a banner that may be coming down. We want to talk about the Quadrant system. We want to talk about Shaka Smart, and we want to talk about Bruce Pearl for National Coach of the Year. Aaron, how's it going, man?
It's going well, Sam. It's funny. You and I were kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. Where should we lead? What is the hottest topic in college basketball right now? And then 2 minutes before we get ready to air, a guy that I think that you probably would have had in your top 2 or 3 in your mock draft had he never been injured, is all of a sudden eligible. And it is, to me, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. I think it's fascinating. I'm really excited to see kind of where this Michael Porter Jr. story goes.
Well, first and foremost, Aaron, there is no question more important than the question that is sweeping the nation, and that is if Duke is back. But, you know, the Michael Porter thing, it might supersede it just like, you know, for a minute, you know, just for 5 minutes while we talk about it. Then we have to get into Duke because it's Duke, you know.
Because they might be back. They
might be back.
And they might not be back.
They might not be back either. So, yeah, let's start with the Michael Porter deal. Michael Porter underwent a microdiscectomy in his lower back, I believe in November, if memory serves. Was supposed to be out for about 4 to 6 months, if I remember correctly. That would put him right around 4 months right now. Obviously, Porter is one of the highest level recruits in the 2017 recruiting class. He is considered a potential top 5 pick in the 2018 NBA draft. What makes Michael Porter such an incredible basketball player? Because I'm sure, as I have, you've seen him many times. You go around to these recruiting events, and Porter has been to so many of them over the years that he's been seen by quite a few people.
Yeah, I mean, he is just, to me, and I am far from, you know, I don't ever claim to be an evaluator, but he's just the great kind of quintessential big wing kind of player that you need in basketball today. And look, there's a reason that he's been called Baby KD through the years. I think it's maybe a little bit hyperbolic at this point in his career, but the point is, like, every time I've seen him, he's awesome, he's big, he's athletic, he's about 6'10", can shoot, can pass, can handle the ball, and it's just a complete player. And it's funny because this time last year, obviously, he was committed to Washington, and when that whole deal went down, I had so many people that were casual college basketball fans saying, what is the big deal with this kid? Like, why is everyone making such a fuss about where he'll end up, Washington, Missouri? We just saw Washington had the first pick in the draft, and you know, he didn't really have that much of an impact. And I said, you know, Michael Porter Jr. is just cut from a different cloth. He is that kind of special player. Obviously, I think you and I both are in agreement. We have no idea what we'll see or how much or if we even will see Michael Porter at this point as we get set to record. But if he does take the court, even if he's just a shell of himself, he should be fun to watch over these next couple weeks.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is set up to be just such an interesting situation because, of course, the first team that he could face on Saturday is Kentucky. Like, there's no other way for this to go down.
Can I just say, I love the reaction of Kentucky fans, like, oh, of course he got cleared to play before Kentucky. Like, these world-renowned surgeons are just sitting, looking at their calendar, wondering when Kentucky comes up on the schedule so they can clear Michael Porter Jr. I'm pretty sure, like, the doctors at the Mayo Clinic or wherever he was seen, like, he was seen by some of the best back specialists in the world. I'm pretty sure they had no idea that they just so happened to be clearing him the day before the Kentucky game.
No, Aaron, they know. So Michael Porter, yeah, as Aaron said, kind of a 3-level scorer. He has the ability to put the ball on the deck. He can knock down shots off of pull-up shots or off of pull-up dribbles. He can, you know, hit shots off the catch. Was right around 39% from 3 over the course of his like last year and a half, if I remember correctly, according to, you know, AAU services, you know, the like crossover places that actually provide numbers on that. He was a really explosive finisher around the rim. I think that stuff kind of gets underrated with his game. He's just the prototypical 6'10" scorer that we've come to know and appreciate within this new era of college basketball. He's a playmaker, full stop. And that's something that Missouri could really use right now. Like Missouri, They do have guys like Kevin Purrier and Jordan Barnett, both of whom I think have had actually really solid years. I know that Purrier kind of is like a whipping boy of sorts sometimes for Missouri fans, but he's still like a solid basketball player on a lot of levels. And Michael Porter is just so much better than these guys. He's going to give them a totally different dimension that when, especially you combine him with someone like a Cassius Robertson, someone like a Jeremiah Tillman, and his brother, Jonte Porter, who's been really solid this year as well for Missouri. It's going to be a really interesting situation to kind of see how this offense and how this Missouri attack, which has become a little bit more of a modern attack than what we expected from Cuonzo Martin getting into Missouri, kind of operates with him in the fold.
100%. And I'm just curious, and this is kind of the macro. You know, the micro is all of the parts about how does he fit and what does it mean for everybody else and how does everybody's role change. First of all, he's the best player on the team, and I think people will be happy to acquiesce to him. By the way, like half the roster is on the roster strictly because they wanted to play with Michael Porter Jr. But my question is, and you know, I am far from an expert on these things. I know our colleague CJ Moore, you know, has talked to doctors and stuff that have performed this procedure that Michael Porter Jr. underwent. I'm just curious, how much does he play? And by the way, as we record, Sam, maybe I haven't seen the right reports. I haven't even seen the fact that he will definitively play.
Right.
And I think it's yeah, I was going to say, like, I think it's one of those deals where, as we kind of led the show, like, it feels like this great, grandiose story, and it very well might be, but it also wouldn't surprise me if, you know, cooler heads, smarter heads prevailed, and obviously Michael Porter's dad being on the staff, where maybe they either A, really limit him, or B, just say, I know you've been cleared by doctors, but there is simply too much on the line to put you kind of back into high-level competition against guys, by the way, that have been going at it for 6, 7, 8 months now, dating back to, you know, last springtime when everybody arrived on campus. So that's kind of the interesting part to me is we all, and I include myself in this, like, it's so easy to get wrapped up in, you know, this kid probably in theory could have been a 20-point-a-game scorer had he been healthy from the beginning of the year, and you just want to throw, you know, midsummer Michael Porter Jr. onto this roster. That's not the guy Missouri's getting, and as of right now, we don't even know what or how much they're getting, which to me is going to be interesting over these next couple weeks as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And like you said, we don't know for sure that he's going to play. In terms of his draft stock, he just needs to be at 100%. You know, like he just should not play unless he is at 100%. And that's really the crux of the matter here. If he's okay, I'm totally cool with him playing. I'm totally cool with him seeing what he can bring to the table for a Missouri team that, as we alluded to earlier, could really use him. And in terms of the re-injury stuff, in terms of what his potential for that is, you know, you see some longer term projections out there, anywhere between 10% and 75%. That's a pretty big number, pretty big variance in terms of what the you know, potential is for re-injury. So I'm just fascinated to see where this goes. And again, we really can't emphasize this enough. This could not come at a bigger, more important time for Missouri, because after winning 5 in a row against Alabama, Kentucky, Mississippi, Mississippi State, and Texas A&M, they've now lost 2 in a row to LSU and Mississippi, and the Mississippi game came at home. So they could use kind of a shot in the arm to really kind of get their season, I don't want to say back on track, but to keep the engine running a little bit on what has been, I would say, a pretty surprising result in terms of how they've been able to keep it together without Michael Porter on the roster.
100%. Yeah, no, and I think shot in the arm is the best way to put it. I don't think there's any way to put it other than the fact that they have overachieved to this point this year. And people can say, oh, you know, well, they just lost Ole Miss at home, and Andy Kennedy's gone, and they lost at LSU. It's like, yeah, but if you think about it, the guys that are actually on the court right now, it's really not like a fundamentally different team than what they had last year. I know Jeremiah Tillman and Jonte Porter were not there last year. I guess Cassius Robertson. It is a little bit of a different team, but I say
totally
this to
different
say,
team.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and I was going to say, like, Michael Porter Jr., like, I'm just saying, like, if I had told you or you had told me or anyone in college basketball had said the day that we tipped off the season that Missouri was not going to have Michael Porter Jr. all year, we would have said bottom 2 or 3 in the SEC, no chance at an NCAA tournament. So the fact that you know that they lost these last couple games that maybe they shouldn't have lost, they're still overachieving on the year. And it's funny because, you know, obviously what I did what we all do when a news story like this breaks, and I went on Twitter and kind of just shared my quick opinion on it. And everyone said, oh, well, you know, too bad he didn't return a week ago. Missouri's tournament hopes are done after they lost to Ole Miss. It's like, well, first of all, no, they're not. But second of all, even if they were on, say, hypothetically, the wrong side of the bubble as we speak, they have still massively overachieved relative to what we thought they would be the day that it was announced that Michael Porter Jr. probably wouldn't play this year. So I think it's a credit to Cuonzo and his staff. More importantly, it just makes it that much more fascinating. The stakes kind of, quote-unquote, that much more high going into these final few weeks of the season.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Let's move on to point number 2 here on our schedule. Is Duke back, Aaron?
I don't know if Duke is back. I also don't know if they ever left. I do love the Duke is better without Marvin Bagley narrative.
Oh, God.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. I feel like you really just want. I've seen you tweet about it a little bit. I know you just want to tee off. I know I'm the guest. I'm supposed to share all sorts of crazy insight, but I know you're itching to just yell at the idiot. So I know I'm the guest, but I'm going to give you the floor if that's okay here for a second.
So here's the deal on Marvin Bagley and Duke, right? So a lot of the conversation has been about Duke's defense over the course of the last 4 games since that North Carolina loss, and over the course of the last 4 games because Marvin Bagley has not been in the lineup. So let's just start here. Over the course of those 4 games, they've played a lot more zone defense. You know, over the course of the last 2 or 3 games, really, I would say it's been almost exclusively zone defense in many ways. And what that has done is it's simplified things for Duke. Their man-to-man communication, their man-to-man help priorities have just been absolutely abysmal this season. They have no idea how to play man-to-man, and I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that their perimeter defenders aren't very good at containing penetration one-on-one. Like, Trayvon Duval is a guy that is athletic and cares defensively at times, but plays over-aggressive defense and puts a lot of pressure on his big man. Grayson Allen and Gary Trent just really can't at all stay in front of guys. And that puts a lot of pressure on Marvin Bagley, who struggles defensively to stay in front of players. So I don't really know exactly how much of this is the difference between Javin DeLaurier and Marvin Bagley defensively, because Javin DeLaurier is a better defender. But what I will say is that the shift to zone plays a much greater role than the Marvin Bagley to Javin DeLaurier difference. They are so much more connected in that zone. They are so much more polished. They're so much more communicative in that zone. And things have been simplified for them in a significant way. And whenever you have a young team that is relying on, right now, 3 freshmen and a sophomore, when Marvin Bagley comes back, it'll be 4 freshmen and a senior. Like, it's so much better to keep things simpler for them, especially when you have as much length as they do. They run, 6'11", 7 foot, 6'5", 6'5", 6'3" across the entire lineup, and that makes just life so much easier for running a zone. So get out of here with that zone defense thing or the Marvin Bagley thing, and I can even give you numbers here. So before last night's game against Louisville, they had played nearly 700 possessions of zone defense. So that includes the 3 games without Marvin Bagley, and it includes everything else that we had seen so far this year with him. Duke has been at right around 0.85 points per 100 possessions with Marvin Bagley in the lineup in zone defensive schemes. And that's not over a small sample. Like, they're in the 88th percentile before last night's game in zone defense. The zone defense is not the issue at all. It's just not. So I'm very unclear on why people would be rushing to say that this is Marvin Bagley's problem.
No, I agree 100%. And what I would say is this: first of all, I don't think they're back because I don't think they ever left. I mean, like, look, I understand it. They were the preseason favorites in Vegas to win the national championship. But I think the thing people forget is there's so much Duke hate and Duke animosity, and we all do it. Like, it's all a running joke within what we do, and it's fun and this and that. But people kind of like wanted to compare it to last year. I think people forget how much of a cluster last year was, right? Like everyone's like, oh, Coach K's underachieving with all these one-and-dones. He just doesn't have it anymore, blah, 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 this and that. And it's like, here's the truth. If you think back to last year, of course, there were a number of injuries. Harry Giles, Jason Tatum, Marquise Bolden, all these guys missed time. Grayson Allen had his on-the-court issues that became off-the-court issues in a one-game suspension. They didn't have a true point guard. The puzzle pieces didn't fit. They had a bunch of great wing players that didn't really play well together. They tried to force Grayson Allen into a point guard role. And so that team actually did underachieve. And if it wasn't for an incredible run at the ACC tournament, I don't remember all of the details, but I think that was the kind of club. They would have been like a 4 or 5 seed somewhere in there. They go on a crazy run. They end up as the number 2 seed, and they lose to South Carolina. So I think because Duke didn't have success last year with the all hands on deck, like one and done philosophy, that everyone assumed that this year was a total dumpster fire, when in reality they were like 19-4 when Marvin Bagley went down. Like, this was not last year. It was not even close. I mean, last year they lost to NC State at home. I think it was literally the last game Mark Gottfried won at NC State before he was fired. They had so many bad losses last year. This year they were a young team that, to your point, Sam, they've been trying to figure themselves out. But to say they're back, and I know you're joking, and you and I are both joking on this one, but to say they're back implies that they left. And, like, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would venture to guess they never fell much further than right around number 10 to 15 in the country. And I'll tell you what, if falling out of the top 10 and then getting back into the top 10 is being back, there are, like, I don't know, 335 Division I teams that would love to be in that scenario. So I think Duke is good with Marvin Bagley. I think they're good without Marvin Bagley. They're certainly playing better now because of the points that you brought up. But I don't think that even when they were, quote-unquote, not playing well, it was nearly as bad as everyone kind of made it out to be.
Did you have to explain the joke, Aaron?
Well, I mean, look, I think it's like the big, like, trend. I think, like, you know, first of all, Duke fans think that we all genuinely hate them. Like, I know this is going to sound crazy, Sam. I sleep the same at night whether Duke wins or loses. My life does not change all that much. But, yeah, that's why I felt like I had to explain it, because I don't really hate Duke. There are too many real things to be mad about than Coach K or the Blue Devils. I don't know. It's just, you know how people are.
Yeah, no, I get it. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, what the biggest question about Duke was the defense, right? Can they consistently sit down and defend? I think that people were more curious if they could contend for a Final Four / national title than if they were ever, like, gone. You know what I mean? So, sure. I don't know. We'll see how Duke goes the rest of the year. This is a really good basketball team, and I'm sure that when Marvin Bagley comes back, we're not going to see any sort of, you know, drop off or significant drop off defensively that counteracts the incredible impact he makes offensively. Let's move on to point number 3, Louisville. It was announced, I believe, on Tuesday that they are going to have to take down the banner, repay all of the money that they were privy to during the NCAA tournament. What is your overall feeling on this, you know, vacating wins, vacating banners, taking down banners? Like, do we care at all about this?
No, we don't. It's weird because I'm surprised that this became like such a big story, because I think we all kind of agree that, oh, by the way, taking down banners is stupid, right? Like there isn't anybody that's like, yeah, take down the banner. This is how you get them back. It's like, as Kevin Ware said, I got that big ring and nobody can take that away from me. And so I guess I was surprised nationally how big of a story it was that this banner was coming down. And by the way, let's keep in mind that the decision earlier this week, it wasn't even the real decision. The real decision came months ago, and Louisville had appealed it, and this was them losing their appeal. So, it's one of these weird stories where I don't really have a hot take. I don't really have a strong opinion. If you break the rules, if your players get extra benefits, and in this case, I'll let the listeners connect the dots on what those extra benefits were, they got to be ineligible. And if they're ineligible, then that means that the games they played in, they can't, Louisville can't get credit for, and they have to be punished for. So because of that, I'm not surprised the banner came down. I'm not thoroughly upset that it came down, and I'm just one of those guys I think you had to punish the school, but I also think, by the way, at the end of the day, it doesn't change the fact that I remember them beating Michigan that night in Atlanta.
Right. Like the deal for me has always been take the money away, take away what actually matters here. Don't make a big deal out of taking away, wins that already happened in games that already happened because you weren't aware of what was happening and didn't do your job to take care of it at the time. Like if your job is going to be to stop ineligible people from performing in basketball, you have to be on top of it at all times. I mean, I hate the idea of retroactively trying to punish kids. I hate the idea of retroactively trying to take away wins. It's absurd. It's totally ridiculous to me. And I don't care if the banner comes down. The wins don't matter. Like the games happened. We saw what happened against Michigan. We saw what happened during that entire 2013 NCAA tournament. They won the title. This is what happened. This is what it is. It's just an absurd thing. And then people try and make it out like the school really cares about this. The fans really, truly care about this. You know what? The fans are going to remember that moment where they beat Michigan and the confetti came down a lot more than they're going to remember this idea of the NCAA on some random Tuesday during February taking away that win. That memory is going to be so much more vivid. It's going to be so much more present with them. They can't take that away from Louisville fans, and trying to legislate that in an era where we, can literally go on YouTube and watch the confetti fall from the sky when the clocks hit 0. It's absurd.
Yeah. And I would add, if I just said to you, Sam, most memorable moment in Memphis basketball history, I would venture to guess that it would be something that came from the 2008 season when they had Derrick Rose that, according to the NCAA, never happened. And
right.
So it's what you said, and it's weird because it's one of these where you want, I don't know, I guess in our business we're supposed to have a super strong opinion about everything, but I'm with you, man. Yeah, I can go on YouTube today. I can see the moment. I remember the game. I remember Spike Albright going crazy in the middle of that game.
Remember Spike?
That's the sad part about all this. Let's not, we can't strike Spike Albright from the record books, can we? I mean, he was incredible that game.
We have to remember Spike. I went to Ohio State. I don't like Michigan. I don't want to root for them. But, man, we got to remember Spike. I am all here for that.
Legend.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we think back to the USC teams of the mid-2000s, we think back to Reggie Bush just dominating. Just because they theoretically took away his Heisman Trophy victory doesn't mean that we're not going to sit here and remember exactly what he did. It's a ridiculous punishment, I think. Let's talk real quick about the Quadrant system, because the Quadrant system, I think, has been kind of a disaster. It in so many ways doesn't actually, it doesn't do a good job of sorting information, I think. First and foremost, it significantly favors teams that are in high major conferences, because what they did was they made the like gap in terms of quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 just way too large. Like, from the difference between a top 30 home win is not a top 30 home win is not equivalent to a top 70 home win. Like, beating Ryder on the road is not equivalent to beating Ryder, on the road, I guess, is not equivalent to beating Arizona State at home. It's just not. Like, it's not even close. So I don't understand why we're even having this discussion about, like, you know, we need to have rack this many quadrant 1 wins. I just hope that the NCAA has the way to put it is foresight to actually take each win and each result into account game by game, and understand that beating Purdue at Mackey Arena is a lot better than even like beating Arizona State at home, because right now both those things are qualified as quadrant 1 wins.
Yeah, and that's going to be, to me, the really interesting kind of case study of when the actual bracket of 68 teams comes out. Because how cut and dried, how much do these quadrant wins and the data that comes from the quadrants weigh on the decision making? Because it's what you said, Sam. It is so heavily favored towards these Power 5 teams. You know, I gave you an example off air, and it's funny because I wrote about this for the Fieldhouse in my Mountain West notebook, which runs on Friday. Which is that maybe I feel differently because I'm covering that league this year. But I watched Boise State this year. This is a team that won at Oregon. That they have a lot of like good wins, but nothing great. But they are being held against. They're basically, they have an impossible standard. As we talk right now, that's a team that sits at 22-6. But they're being compared with, say, a Syracuse or a Louisville that just has so many more opportunities because of the conference that they're in to pick up what are seen as quote-unquote significant wins. And so the example that I used in the notebook that I encourage everybody to check out is Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, we all understand, you know, just a tough year for Mike Bray. He's a great coach, but he loses Bonzie Colson for basically all of ACC play. He loses Matt Farrell for a number of games, and I think they're sitting at something like 15-12, and I know for a fact they are 6-9 in ACC play heading into the weekend, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong. There aren't many teams that would lose an All-American that wouldn't miss a beat. So 16-12, 6-9 in ACC play, but because they're in the RPI top 70, they're considered a quadrant 1 win if you beat them at Joyce Center. And so Syracuse has beaten them on the road, or Syracuse has beaten them in South Bend, Miami has beaten them in South Bend. And I don't even think a Syracuse fan would say that in this specific year, going into Notre Dame and getting a win is something that they're going to rally around and that they're really proud of as kind of a signature win on their resume. But under the quadrant system, kind of to your point, it looks much better than it actually is. And so I don't know what the answer is, how we change it in the offseason. I think you probably made the most logical, argument of just simply limiting the number of what each quadrant is as far as number of teams that are in each quadrant. But I say it to say, I hope that this isn't the only barometer that the selection committee uses in determining who those at-large bids are, because if it is, I think we're going to get like 9 teams from the ACC, 9 teams from the SEC, 9 teams from the Big 12, and the conferences, the A-10, the Mountain West. You know, if New Mexico State somehow didn't win the WAC, and maybe that's a bad example, but the broader point is we're just going to get a lot of average to slightly above average power conference teams. I don't know that we're going to get the 68 best teams.
So Northeastern right now is 67th in the RPI. Hofstra, Hofstra, and Utah State right now are counting quadrant 1 wins against Northeastern because they beat them at Northeastern. I'm trying to run through some other examples here. So Ryder, Hofstra has multiple quadrant 1 wins by beating Ryder and Northeastern.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just say it out loud. LSU, as we speak, is in the top 75 in the RPI. So winning at LSU, which Will Wade has done an unbelievable job in his first year getting that thing turned around. But they are not that is not a win that should be at the top of anyone's resume on their tournament resume, but it's going to be under this quadrant system. So, it's just one of those deals. It's what you said, Sam. It was supposed to help this thing. It was supposed to make things clearer, and I think it's just muddied it up. And by the way, here's the other thing too, which is pretty obvious, but it's worth stating. Not only are these power teams getting more chances to pick up significant wins, but their losses don't look as bad, even though, by the way, some of these losses are bad. So it's just it was a valiant attempt, but I think it needs to be majorly looked at in the offseason. And like I said, I hope that the quadrant wins aren't the be-all, end-all when we're selecting these teams a couple Sundays from now.
Yeah, I mean, there are just so many better ways to go about teams. Like, I think that they would probably be better off just, like, using KenPom than this, or using like something else than using the quadrant system, because these quadrant wins are just not great in my opinion. And I understand that KenPom runs into its own problems, right? Like it's a lot of a predictive nature. The idea is that they're trying to be more of a predictive model than anything. But here's the thing, past results go into that predictive model, and it accounts for your efficiency margin and margin of victory in a way that I think is very important when you're accounting for a performance of a team over the course of the year. And I'm not saying just use KenPom. I'm saying use everything that you can, including maybe not the RPI, because the RPI is based on bad math, but like use KPI, which is a really good example of this. Use strength of record, use BPI, use Sagarin, use any sort of resume tool that you've got. So just to consider all of the factors that you can to get these decisions right. And that's ultimately what matters to me at the end of the day. We have to make sure we get the right teams in the field of 68 at the end of the day.
And that's real quick. I just wanted to add that is what should be the most important metric, getting the 68 best teams in this tournament. It's just a random example, but you watched St. Bonaventure the other night against Rhode Island. I find it hard to believe that there are 9 teams in the ACC, 9 teams in the SEC that are all better than St. Bonaventure when they're at their best. So that was the only point I want to make is let's just get the best 68 teams, whatever metric we have to use.
Yeah. Real quick, there's been news that just came out of the, out of Arizona and out of the NCAA. Allonzo Trier has been ruled ineligible again. Basically, what's happening here is, if you remember last year, Allonzo Trier missed part of last season due to a steroid or performance enhancing drug. I forget exactly what it was that was in his system whenever he did a drug test. The results of a test that he took, I guess a little while ago, and then they were confirmed today, revealed the reappearance of that same substance in his body. And the amount detected was minuscule by scientific standards and appears to be a remnant of a substance which the NCAA agreed Allonzo had taken unknowingly in 2016. The university is appealing the decision and is hopeful that Allonzo will regain his eligibility soon. I mean, if this is the same deal and it's still just a remnant of like the past result, the NCAA needs to rectify this, I think. But I mean, if it's not, then I understand their decision,
Yeah, and it's tough because we're obviously catching this in real time here, but all the information that we have, you just laid out, Sam. And yeah, first of all, remember he was suspended 19 or 20 games last year, somewhere in that ballpark. And they and everyone agreed that he didn't willingly take this. He wasn't, this wasn't, Barry Bonds in 1998 here. Like, he put some substance into his body that it shouldn't have been. And then a remnant a year and a half later, it's so tough to speculate like this on the spot, but based on the knowledge that we have, and the only knowledge we have is what you read right there, Sam, straight from the, press release from the University of Arizona. I hope that this is a blip on the radar. I hope that this is not a significant suspension, because this is a kid that could have gone pro last year. I think he wanted to help his cause. I think he genuinely wanted to come back to Arizona to get better, to help that program, maybe reach that first Final Four under Sean Miller. And this thing has just been a never-ending kind of just ordeal. I just feel bad for him after everything he's been through to deal with this again. I'm with you. I hope the NCAA, one, looks at this case and resolves it quickly, and two, if based on the information that we have, I hope that, frankly, that they let him play, because this seems like a pretty raw deal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that where I'm at is that the NCAA has to resolve this quickly. Like, the NCAA can't take months like it did last year and try and determine all of this. They need to say, over the course, at least before the Pac-12 tournament, we'll say, they need to say whether or not Allonzo Trier is going to be eligible the rest of the year. Giving 10 days does not seem like an unreasonable expectation of time. They just need to actually come to a full stop conclusion on this appeal immediately and allow Trier to get on with his life, with whatever he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I know this is a really weird example that isn't apples to apples, but, this news kind of, what it sort of reminds me of is what happened with DeAnthony Melton this year. And so DeAnthony Melton, totally different deal, was suspended because of potential extra, but at the same time, it just dragged on. And if we had decided that this kid wasn't going to play, I mean, he just recently removed himself from school to prepare for the pros, but it's like, I don't think it's fair for that kid to be coming to practice every day for 5 months while you continue to put a case together, not put a case together, collect evidence, put in a decision, appeal the decision, all that stuff. I'm with you. I know it's a terrible analogy, but I just hope that, kind of to your point, that this thing just gets resolved quick, because frankly, especially if what we know, this wasn't intentional, the kid just deserves better. The kid deserves, like we were saying, to either get on with his professional career or finish what will likely be finish his college basketball career as best he can over these next 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, and let's just kind of note real quick. So, like, USC was holding out DeAnthony Melton. This seems to be an NCAA decision. So there is, like, a small difference there. But the point stands that they do need to actually make a decision. Like, the powers that be that are holding this kid out of play need to make a decision and not actually string him along in the way that he seems to have been strung along here. So let's go on ahead and move on to our next topic here and kind of run through these last two a little bit quicker. Well, Texas has been one of the most interesting teams in college basketball, and it seems like the Texas fan base is starting to get a little bit stir crazy over the performance of Shaka Smart so far. I tend to be of the mind that he lost Andrew Jones. The fact that this team has kept it together is impressive in a lot of ways. We all expected Andrew Jones to be a top 60 player in the country this year. And he basically was living up to that throughout the course of the first 10 games and seemed to be well on his way before a terrible leukemia diagnosis. And that kind of gives him a pass from me on his performance this year. The fact that they're 16-12, and I think they would probably be in the NCAA tournament if it ended today. Like, they don't have any losses outside of the top 70 right now, which is insane given the fact that they have 12 losses on the season. This is a good basketball team that ultimately just suffers from one crippling illness.
No, and I think the other thing too that I think goes underreported is that, by the way, their starting point guard is a freshman who has never played, meaningful college basketball. And I think he's been pretty good this year, by the way, for the most part, Matt Coleman. And, Mo Bamba, while he is a lottery pick, potential top 5 pick, he is not the kind of player that can put your program on his back the way that Marvin Bagley, say, could do at Duke. Marvin Bagley, can get 20 and roll out of bed and get 20 and 10. Mo Bamba's not that kind of player. And so to me, I just wonder how much of this was just unrealistic expectations. You see a top, I don't know where Texas ended up being in the recruiting rankings, but you have a handful of elite prospects. Matt Coleman's about a top 40 prospect, Mo Bamba top 5, top 10, and you think, okay, we're just going to roll out, we're going to second or third in the Big 12, we're going to go, 24-7, and it's just like, those weren't those guys. And then, oh, by the way, you lose a sophomore that, as you said, Sam, a guy that frankly maybe could have been drafted last year if he decided to stay in the NBA draft. You lose that guy in the middle of the year. You're probably your most talented, at least at this point, your best scorer, basically, for lack of a better term. So you have a freshman point guard, a freshman center who isn't kind of offensively minded, and then your best scorer you lose as well for the season, as you said, with a terrible illness that we're all obviously monitoring and praying that he gets better. And we all, kind of, I would hope, understand that this is so much bigger than basketball for Andrew Jones. But I'm saying it to say, like, if you really just say that out loud, you lose your best player to this terrible illness. You have a freshman point guard. Nobody else, you're asking guys to play roles that they weren't expecting to play. Like, this isn't surprising. And then, oh, by the way, as you said, Sam, they're kind of losing to the teams that I know Texas fans aren't happy to hear this, but that they probably should be losing to because the Big 12 is awesome.
The Big 12 is, just an absolutely incredible league this year. I think that many agree it's maybe the best league in college basketball this season. To not expect them to lose games, especially whenever you consider the fact that Shaka's been very aggressive in the way that he schedules in the non-league. I mean, they played Duke, Gonzaga, Butler in the PK80. They played VCU on the road. They played Michigan. They played Alabama, and they had to play Mississippi in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. Like, this is a ridiculous schedule. And the fact that Texas is 16-12 after everything they've gone through is kind of impressive to me now. I do think they need to start shooting the basketball. At some point in Shaka's tenure, they need to be an above-average shooting team. Otherwise, they're never going to get to where they need to get to. I will say, Brock Cunningham and Kamaka Hepa are both really good shooters, and I think they're going to play a significant role for Texas next season. But it's becoming a problem in a significant way. Whenever you've shot 30% from three over the course of a 2-season stretch, that's a problem that you really, really need to fix.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I would go back to one thing with the schedule, though, and and we kind of hit on this, Sam, is that no real bad losses, but it's worth noting they have some good wins too. Like, they swept Oklahoma, they beat Texas Tech, they beat TCU when I believe TCU was at about full strength pre-Jalen Fisher injury. That was right around that time. I could be off by a game or two.
You're right.
But I say it just, I say it to say that it's not as though, it's not as though, say, Texas was in the, say, Pac-12 and all of their wins were coming against a bad bottom of the league. They have no bad losses. And, oh, by the way, they have some really good wins as well. And, by the way, that's why at 16-12, they're still very much in the NCAA tournament picture. I don't know what our Fieldhouse bracket, what the most recent bracketology says, but I think every bracketology that I've read has said that this is still very much an NCAA tournament team. Now, is that partly because of the quad system that we spent time talking about earlier? Maybe. But I say it, it's just, to me, I can't get this worked up. Like, I see really bad coaching in a lot of places. I don't necessarily see it at Texas. As you said, there are little things that you want to get better at, but, big things if you want to put it that way with the shooting. But this is not like hit the panic button, sky is falling stuff. This just might not be exactly what you thought you signed up for 3 or 4 years ago, and certainly not this year when you bring in the recruiting class that you did.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they're sitting at 6 Quadrant 1 wins right now. That's obviously going to get you pretty close to home most years. So the last thing I want to talk about here with you is my notion that Bruce Pearl should be the national coach of the year. I don't really think this race should be all that close. I guess it should be close because of what Tony Bennett has done, because of the fact that Chris Holtman has Ohio State at 23-7. You can point to Mick Cronin. You can point to Mark Few, I think, has gotten kind of a short shrift in this discussion. Matt Painter, Jay Wright continues to have Villanova rolling. Chris Beard has done a great job, but this Auburn team is sitting at 24-4. They were picked like 9th or 10th in the SEC, and they lost their two best players in Austin Wiley and Daniel Purifoy to suspension in the first week of the preseason because of the FBI investigation. The fact that this team is not considered this is not considered almost a shoo-in for National Coach of the Year is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and it's really funny because, first of all, to backtrack on Auburn. So, as you know, as anyone who follows me on Twitter knows, I have been a big believer that for at least this one season, the SEC was going to be really good. And I said that in July and August when I kind of just started looking at what everybody was returning, Michael Porter Jr. and the freshmen coming to Missouri, Texas A&M bringing back their whole team, Alabama adding Colin Sexton to basically a full cast of returning characters. But Auburn wasn't a team that anyone was even talking about as a lot. Nobody was even talking about them as a for sure NCAA tournament team. I mean, they were a team that I think a lot of people thought, okay, if the stars align, maybe they'll sneak in as the 6th or 7th SEC team, and they'll be out in the first weekend, and we'll call it a great year. So you have that as a backdrop, and then, as you said, Sam, you lose your two best players, and you just get on this incredible run. And I know it's a one-game sample size, but what they did on Wednesday night against Alabama. So keep in mind, they have now lost two players to suspension. They lost Anthony McLemore for the season, who was basically their best low-post presence, kind of if you even want to call him that. And Mustafa Heron was out.
Absolutely killer defender.
Exactly. And Mustafa Heron was out with an illness. So you're down now 4 out of probably your top 6 or 7 players. And then, oh, by the way, Bryce Brown still has a shoulder injury that every time he goes to the sidelines, he's getting treatment for, and he's playing through it. And you smack around Alabama. And so to me, I know that was a one-game sample size, but what's been incredible about this team to me is just everything just rolls off their shoulders. One guy goes down, the next guy steps up. One guy gets in foul trouble, another, guy you weren't expecting plays well. I'm with you. I think especially as Ohio State has started to fade a tiny bit down the stretch here, as Purdue has started to fade a tiny bit down the stretch here, I don't even think it's close. Auburn at this point has basically wrapped up at least a share of the SEC regular season title. I believe they would have to lose all the rest of their games, and Tennessee would have to win all the rest of their games for them not to be at least co-champ. And you talk about a league that is much improved, and this team just keeps on rolling, just keeps on beating good teams. I am so on board with you, Sam. I'm whatever you think about Bruce Pearl, this FBI investigation, the coaching job, the X's and O's, the shuffling of puzzle pieces, it's been unbelievable this season.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, this has been a remarkable year for a guy who has been long a really good coach. I mean, I understand the trepidation about him as a dude and about some of the decisions he's made in the past, but I mean, just look at what he's been able to accomplish. It's really hard for me to look beyond that. Do you have anything else you want to talk about here, Aaron? Do we want to get into a couple of picks before we go?
I mean, if you want to throw my way, I'll give you a pick. I don't know how trustworthy I can be, but I wouldn't go to Vegas with my picks and throw your mortgage down on them. But if you want to talk some picks, I'm down. You know that.
Auburn at Florida, 8:30 p.m. on Saturday on the SEC Network. What do you got, Aaron?
Auburn at Florida. You know what? I'm going to go Auburn because every time I doubt this team, I just keep thinking to myself, okay, this has to be the game they take a step back. I thought that, this past, the other day against Alabama. I've thought that at various points in the season. They keep on rocking and rolling. I'm assuming that whatever illness, whatever bug that Mustafa Heron had the other day, he's gonna be okay. And I'll tell you what, if you can win at Tennessee, if you can win at some of the places that Auburn has won at this year, I think you can go into the, Gator Alley or whatever the hell. I'm blanking on what the hell their stupid student section is named. But point being, you can go to Florida and get the win.
Yeah, I think
the O-Dome, that's what it is.
Well, I don't know if they're playing the O-Dome right now. Isn't it being like renovated or something? There's something weird going on there. I would agree with you. I would take Auburn. Florida has been kind of sneaky bad at home over the course of the last month.
Agreed.
They've lost 3 of their last 5 games in Gainesville. So I'm with you. I'm going to take Auburn straight up there, basically. Kansas at Texas Tech. This is the game that was supposed to be for the Big 12 crown, but Keenan Evans' injury obviously threw that for a loop. What do you got for me, Aaron? Obviously, this game is going to be so predicated upon whether or not Keenan Evans actually plays.
Yeah, and I don't think we can assume that even if he does play, he's going to be anywhere close to 100%. The weird thing to me is that at times Kansas has been better on the road than they've been at home this year. I mean, you look at the fact, they lost to Texas Tech at Fog Allen. They lost to Arizona State in the out-of-conference at Fog Allen. West Virginia, we know what happened there this past weekend. So I like Kansas because for some reason I feel like there are moments in time where they're really, really, really good on the road. For that reason, I like Kansas in this game.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Kansas too, just not knowing enough about Keenan Evans' injury right now. We'll see what ends up going down there. Villanova at Creighton. Creighton's always been a pretty sneaky, difficult place to play in Omaha. Villanova can, really continue its run atop the Big East over the course of the last 5 years. They really need this win too to continue that run at the top of the Big East, given the fact that Xavier only has a home game against Providence and a road game at DePaul left. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you kind of said, we think of Creighton as this incredible home environment, and it is, but Marquette just went in there and won like a week ago. So, to me, I have to give Villanova so much credit for what they did last week against Xavier. That was the game that I had circled as, okay, this is the moment that Xavier, at least for this moment in time, overtakes Villanova as the best team in the league. Xavier was at home in the Cintas Center, and Villanova just put a hurting on them. And if you can go into Xavier in that environment, I think you can do the same at Creighton. For that reason, I like Nova on the road.
I'm going to go with Villanova on the road as well. Michigan at Maryland. Maryland's fallen on hard times recently, but Michigan is coming off of a solid win at Penn State. They've won 4 in a row. What do you think?
Yeah, Maryland, I don't think I'm the first person to say this. It just feels like they're snake bitten this year. And they're just, frankly, and I don't know if it's just because they're down guys or what the deal is, they just don't seem very good in close games. It feels like every game that they've played this year, they've had a chance to win late. And frankly, in most of them, they found a way to, for lack of a better term, not win. So for that reason, I find it hard to believe that with their season basically over, I don't think there's any way short of winning the Big Ten tournament that they're a realistic NCAA tournament team. I don't know. I kind of like Michigan. I feel like they're quietly playing better than I think a lot of people realize.
Wichita State on the road against SMU.
Well, I think the answer to me is Wichita. SMU is just banged up. I know they just won the other night, but I like Wichita playing really well, obviously coming off that Cincy win last weekend.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think that, it seems like without Shake Milton, certainly without Jure Foster, this is a really tough situation for SMU. Wichita should probably go in there and roll. Arizona at Oregon. Obviously, the news about Allonzo Trier throws this for a loop, but do we think that Oregon can pull off the upset?
It's interesting. For some reason, the Oregon schools in general are a very tough place to play for these Pac-12 teams. And, part of it's Oregon's just been awesome the last couple of years, but USC hadn't won in Oregon since, 2009 before this season. UCLA has always struggled there. I think they've lost their last 2 or 3. I will call an upset, I guess, if it's an upset. I guess we'll find out how much of an upset it is. Because I think Oregon actually hasn't been playing terrible. They could have won either of those games in LA last weekend. Both were pretty close. Arizona is just, even when Arizona was playing well this year, it didn't feel like they were having all that much fun. This kind of strikes me as a group that maybe just wants their season to be over, and this Allonzo Trier news isn't going to help anything.
Yeah, I think I am going to go with the upset here too with Oregon. Oregon's kind of playing for its season in a lot of ways. They really probably need to sweep Arizona State and Arizona this weekend to have a chance. Arizona State game happens Thursday night just after we finish recording this podcast. So I think I'm with you. I think I'm going to go with Oregon as well. Let's go on ahead and move down the ladder here. Arkansas at Alabama. Both these teams are pretty solidly in the NCAA tournament, it seems like right now. Arkansas, I think, is probably in a slightly more precarious position, but do you think that either of these teams can pick up a nice quality win here?
Yeah, it's weird. Alabama's just been really hit or miss this year. They have some unbelievable wins. They've got some head-scratching losses, too. This wouldn't qualify as a head-scratching loss, but I think Arkansas kind of getting embarrassed the other night by Kentucky. It was every bit as ugly as that final score, 15-point differential indicated. I think they go on the road. Alabama, I just don't know what I'm getting from game to game. Arkansas, I think, is a little bit more consistent. I don't know that they're the better team, but they're the more consistent team. For that reason, I'll take the Hogs.
Trae Young at home against Kansas State. Kansas State needs a quality win. Oklahoma needs to get off the schneid here a little bit. Any pick here?
Yeah, listen, I feel like I've been tough on Trae Young this year. He's a phenomenal player. I didn't like the way that certain, maybe media outlets, certainly not us at the Fieldhouse, but maybe some TV partners, I felt like they they just overcovered him, for lack of a better term. And so I think I've been too negative on Trae Young. He's still obviously leading the country in a lot of very important statistical categories. So I'm going to say that this is the game that Trae Young, Oklahoma, at least for one day, get back on track. I like him to win.
I think I agree with you. I am going to go with Trae Young, kind of figuring this out. But I will say he had a bear of a time in their first game. Barry Brown and that Kansas State defensive scheme really gave him trouble. They just picked him up right at half court and really tried to bother him. It's going to be fascinating to see how they pull that off. Let's bookend the show by talking Missouri, Kentucky. Could be the return of Michael Porter, but I don't know. It seems like it's going to be very unclear up until game time if that's actually going to be the case. Kentucky against Missouri. What's your choice there, Mr. Torres?
Yeah, I think let's bookend it right where we started. We don't know as of this recording if Michael Porter Jr. is even going to play. We don't know how much he will play if he does play. And we certainly, I think it's safe to assume, he will not be the Michael Porter Jr. that we all saw during his high school days, AAU days, and I guess the first couple weeks of practice at Missouri. I don't think that his presence is a rallying cry or anything like that, so I like Kentucky playing better right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky as well. I think that one makes a lot of sense, in all honesty. They're just, I think, playing reasonably well right now. They're at home at Rupp, and that's going to be a tough environment for Michael Porter to return to, even if he does end up playing in this game. Aaron, tell the people what you've got coming up on the site, and tell the people what's going on in your life.
Well, in my life, oh man, where do I start? I woke up today, and I obviously love working with you guys at the Fieldhouse. You can follow me on Twitter at Aaron_Torres, doing kind of, pinch hitting wherever I'm kind of needed with the site. Obviously, living out here on the West Coast, a lot of Mountain West stuff, a lot of Pac-12 stuff. As I said, I have a Mountain West notebook popping on Friday where I think I make a compelling argument for Boise State. As I said in the most recent kind of Fieldhouse bracketology, my buddy Stu Mandel, who I've known for years, really, frankly, as good of a bracketologist as there is on the internet, Boise is not in his field of 68, and I just make the case that kind of what we talked about at the top, that don't just go by quadrant wins, because if you look at not only Boise, how bogus the quadrant system is, but then also they're just kind of the quintessential team that tried to schedule up and just got burned by some teams not being as good as they were expected. They played at Oregon. Well, Oregon's not. Well, they made the Final Four last year. They're obviously not that same team. SMU was good when they played them, and then SMU went down with injuries, as we just discussed. So I'm saying this to say, I think I make a compelling argument for why We need to keep Boise very much in the bubble picture if they do what they have to do going forward. And then, just championship week in the NCAA tournament, just locked and loaded and doing whatever everybody needs for help. It's going to be a fun couple weeks. I know you and I speak for a lot of people when we say we love what's coming over these next couple weeks.
Go subscribe to The Athletic. It's been really good over the course of the last couple of months, particularly, I guess, over the course of the last year. We've had some really great stuff go up on the site recently. Go check that out. Go check out Nicole Auerbach's Tom Crean profile. Brian Hamilton wrote about Lindell Wigginton. Go check all of that out and more at The Athletic. We'll be back on Sunday with a recap of everything that you saw on Saturday and over the course of the day on Sunday. But until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.